If a global oil shock hits tomorrow, the region that suffers first will not be the United States or Europe. It will be Asia, and the consequences will unfold faster than most people expect. Because while Asia drives global growth, it remains deeply dependent on energy it does not control, imported across some of the most fragile routes on Earth. In recent months, early warning signs have started to appear: capital quietly leaving Asian markets, currencies weakening, and energy costs rising faster than policymakers anticipated. This is not just another oil cycle. It is a structural vulnerability that has been building for decades, hidden beneath economic success and rapid industrial expansion. If supply tightens even slightly, the pressure does not spread evenly. It concentrates, and Asia becomes the epicenter of economic stress almost immediately. Understanding why requires looking beyond headlines, into the supply chains, trade routes, and financial systems that keep Asia running every single day. Because once those systems are strained, the ripple effects will not stay regional. They will reshape the global economy in ways that few are fully prepared for. To understand this risk, we need to go back to how Asia's growth model was built and why energy sits at the center of everything. Over the past 3 decades, countries across Asia transformed into manufacturing powerhouses, exporting goods to the world while importing vast amounts of raw materials and energy. Unlike the United States, which produces significant domestic oil, most Asian economies rely heavily on imports, particularly from the Middle East, to sustain their industries. China, Japan, South Korea, and India together account for a massive share of global oil demand, yet they control only a fraction of the supply they depend on. This imbalance means that any disruption, even a temporary one, can quickly translate into higher costs, supply shortages, and economic instability across the region. The system works efficiently in stable conditions, with oil flowing through established routes and markets adjusting smoothly to changes in demand and pricing. But stability is not guaranteed, especially when geopolitical tensions intersect with critical choke points that carry a significant portion of global energy supply. One of the most important of these choke points is the Strait of Hormuz, through which a large percentage of the world's oil exports must pass. Another is the Strait of Malacca, a narrow corridor that connects the Indian Ocean to the Pacific and serves as a lifeline for Asian energy imports. These routes are not just busy, they are vulnerable, exposed to geopolitical tensions, military threats, and even accidents that could disrupt traffic at any moment. Recent tensions in the Middle East have once again highlighted how quickly supply risks can escalate, even without a full-scale conflict breaking out. At the same time, financial markets have started reacting, with investors pulling capital from emerging Asian economies as uncertainty around energy prices grows. This combination of physical vulnerability and financial sensitivity creates a feedback loop that can amplify even small disruptions into larger economic shocks. To see how this plays out, we need to break down the mechanics of an oil crisis and how it specifically impacts Asia's economic structure. When oil prices rise, the immediate effect is an increase in import costs for countries that rely heavily on foreign energy supplies. For Asian economies, this means higher costs for transportation, manufacturing, and electricity generation, all of which depend on stable and affordable energy inputs. These higher costs do not stay confined to energy sectors. They ripple through the entire economy, raising the price of goods and reducing consumer purchasing power. At the same time, governments may be forced to increase subsidies or intervene in markets to stabilize prices, putting additional pressure on public finances. For export-driven economies, higher production costs can erode competitiveness, making their goods more expensive on global markets and reducing demand. This is particularly critical for countries like China and South Korea, where manufacturing exports form a significant part of economic output. Currency markets add another layer of pressure, as rising import bills increase demand for foreign currency, weakening local currencies and making imports even more expensive. This creates a cycle where energy costs rise, currencies weaken, and inflation accelerates, forcing central banks into difficult policy decisions. Raising interest rates to control inflation can slow economic growth, while keeping rates low risks further currency depreciation and capital outflows. Recent trends already show this dynamic beginning to unfold, with investors moving funds into safer assets as uncertainty around global energy markets increases. Capital outflows can reduce liquidity in domestic markets, increase borrowing costs, and limit the ability of businesses to invest and expand. For countries with high levels of external debt, a weaker currency makes servicing that debt more expensive, adding another layer of financial strain. At the same time, supply chain disruptions can compound the problem, as higher fuel costs increase shipping expenses and delay the movement of goods. Asia's role as the world's manufacturing hub means that any disruption here does not remain localized. It affects global supply chains and trade flows. This interconnectedness amplifies the impact of an oil crisis, turning a regional energy issue into a global economic event. Unlike previous decades, today's supply chains are highly optimized and often lack redundancy, making them more sensitive to shocks. A disruption in one part of the system can cascade quickly, affecting production schedules, delivery times, and inventory levels across multiple industries. Energy-intensive sectors such as chemicals, steel, and transportation are particularly vulnerable, as their margins are directly tied to fuel costs. Even a moderate increase in oil prices can force companies to cut output, delay investments, or pass costs onto consumers, further driving inflation. At the household level, rising fuel and electricity prices reduce disposable income, limiting consumer spending and slowing economic activity. For emerging economies in Southeast Asia, where income levels are lower, the impact can be even more pronounced, leading to social and political pressures. Governments may attempt to cushion the impact through subsidies or price controls, but these measures can strain budgets and distort markets over time. In extreme cases, prolonged energy shocks can lead to fiscal deficits, currency crises, and broader economic instability. The strategic dimension cannot be ignored either, as countries compete for limited energy supplies during periods of scarcity. This competition can drive up prices further, while also increasing geopolitical tensions as nations seek to secure access to critical resources. China, for example, has invested heavily in diversifying its energy sources and securing long-term supply agreements, but it remains exposed to global price fluctuations. India faces similar challenges, balancing rapid economic growth with a heavy reliance on imported energy and limited domestic production capacity. Japan and South Korea, both highly industrialized and resource-poor, are among the most vulnerable to sustained disruptions in global oil supply. Even countries with some domestic production, such as Malaysia and Indonesia, are not immune, as they still rely on global markets for pricing and supply stability. This widespread dependence means that an oil crisis does not create isolated problems. It creates synchronized stress across multiple economies. Financial markets tend to react quickly to such scenarios, often amplifying volatility through rapid shifts in investor sentiment and capital allocation. When investors perceive increased risk, they move capital into safer assets, often outside the region, exacerbating currency and liquidity pressures. Recent data already indicates early signs of this behavior, with funds flowing out of certain Asian markets amid rising geopolitical and energy concerns. This pattern is not new, but the scale and speed at which it can occur today is significantly greater due to the interconnected nature of global finance. The result is a situation where physical supply risks and financial market reactions reinforce each other, creating a more severe overall impact. In contrast, regions with greater energy independence or diversified supply sources are better positioned to absorb such shocks. The United States, for example, has significantly increased its domestic production over the past decade, reducing its vulnerability to external disruptions. Europe, while still dependent on imports, has been actively diversifying its energy sources and investing in alternatives following recent crises. Asia, however, remains heavily tied to traditional supply routes and external sources, making it more exposed to both price and supply volatility. This structural dependence is the core reason why Asia is likely to bear the brunt of any future oil crisis. The implications extend beyond economics, influencing political stability, regional cooperation, and long-term strategic planning. Countries may accelerate efforts to secure alternative energy sources, invest in renewables, or strengthen strategic reserves to mitigate future risks. But these transitions take time, and in the short term, the region remains vulnerable to sudden disruptions in global energy markets. For businesses and investors, understanding this dynamic is critical, as it shapes risk profiles, investment decisions, and long-term strategies. Ignoring these signals can lead to significant losses, while anticipating them can create opportunities in a rapidly changing landscape. Ultimately, the question is not whether another oil shock will occur, but when and how prepared different regions will be when it does. For Asia, preparation will determine whether the impact is manageable or transformative, shaping the region's economic trajectory for years to come. Because in a world where energy remains the foundation of economic activity, control over supply is not just an advantage, it is a necessity. And right now, that control lies largely outside of Asia, leaving the region exposed to forces it cannot fully influence. If you want to understand where the next major economic shock could emerge, watching Asia's energy vulnerability is a good place to start. Because when pressure builds in this system, it does not stay contained, it spreads, and the effects are felt far beyond the region itself. If you found this breakdown useful, subscribe for more deep dive analysis on global power, energy, and the forces shaping the world economy.